So, I would love to shift the paradigm on the idea of fear of failure because it's something so many, again, it's one of those taglines that's thrown around a lot, this idea of fear of failure. I would, I worry that it's said so often that people assume that it's true because what I have found is that there are real fears out there, right? Fear of death is real. Fear of capture is real, right? Fear of being discovered is real. Like that's real fear. When you've felt those fears, all of a sudden failure does not compare as a fear.
This month, we welcome Andrew Bustamante to the podcast. Andrew is an Air Force combat veteran and former covert CIA intelligence officer. He is the founder of the company Everyday Spy, which believes that the mental, physical, and social spy skills the CIA teaches can help anyone accomplish whatever they set their mind to achieve. Andrew was also featured in the Lex Fridman podcast, where they discussed a range of topics on Russia, China, and utilizing spycraft to achieve goals. Kervin and Andrew discuss living in rural America, using failure to achieve success, different types of fear, and so much more. We hope you enjoy this episode.
All right, welcome the hair, the myth, the legend, Mr. Andrew Bustamante. How are you doing?
I'm good, Kervin. I appreciate you having me, man.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on. I don't think you need an introduction, but I would like you to take a few moments to tell anyone who I haven't sent the Lex Fridman podcast to or sent your information to, let them know who you are and what you've done in your life and what you're doing now.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Andrew Bustamante, and I'm a former covert CIA intelligence officer. I have since left CIA and gone on to create my own business. My business is called everydayspy.com, and I teach businesses and people how to use real-world spy tradecraft, spy tactics, spy techniques to gain an unfair advantage in real life. And it's funny because I always say that. I always tell people very clearly, like, look, if you're talking to me, we're talking about unfair advantages. And there's people out there who really aren't comfortable with that terminology of unfair advantage. So, if that rubs you the wrong way or if it rubs somebody listening the wrong way, I hope they know that's a reflection of me not being a good fit. It has nothing to do with Kervin not being a good fit.
Although I am not a good fit on a lot of things. So we will get into Everyday Spy, which is the company, right? But I first wanted to start off because it's very interesting in your journey, how you talked about in high school, you didn't really fit in, you said, or you were maybe sort of dorky or counterculture kind of person. And you had all these great plans for the future. I believe you told people you're going to the Air Force Academy. You were going to do this. You're going to become an officer in the Air Force and sort of this small town in Pennsylvania high school. You were looked at as that's never going to happen.
Yeah.
So how did that all work out?
Yeah. And, I really appreciate you bringing this story up, man, because it's not something that people usually comment on or really care about, but it's so important to me. Because when you look at the United States, most of the United States is small towns. Most of the United States is rural people, hashing out a life without the guarantee or promise of some six-figure job somewhere. So, when I was in 1998, when I was graduating high school, and in 1996, when I found out that there was a full ride scholarship to a military academy that I might be able to, apply for, counterculture wasn't a thing. You were either mainstream and cool or you weren't cool. Those were the only two options. And I don't know if that's the same or different now. I don't know if high schools have found a way to make uncool kids cool. I hope so.
I don't know. My kids are very counterculture, but they're also homeschooled. That's probably part of the counterculture.
That makes you counterculture too, brother.
Yeah. And that's probably why I am fascinated by that story, because I came from a small town high school and joined the military out of that high school and had people telling me, because I'm lazy, because I didn't like authority, that I wouldn't succeed either. So it really fascinates me how you went the same route. What brought you towards the Air Force?
Yeah, so this is not glamorous, but it's honest. So I was a sophomore in high school. My parents were making it very clear to me that they did not have enough money saved up to send me to college. My dad was, gung-ho. He was like, at 18 years old, you're out of the house because you got to go fend for yourself. You're either going to go to the military or you're going to find a job, but you're not living at home for free anymore. And that was when I started taking the whole college search seriously, because I again, going back in time, you're in the 90s. College was like, it was a must have. If you were going to be a successful professional, you had to have college. And if you weren't going to go to college, then you kind of had to accept early on that, well, I'm never going to make a lot of money. So for me, and the way I was raised, I wanted to give myself every possible opportunity. So I had to find a way to make college happen somehow, either taking loans or going to the military and letting the military give me a veteran benefit so I could go to college. But college had to happen. And that's when I found a female senior who was actually on the same cross country team as I was. She was like a hard charger. She was like the valedictorian of the school. She was beautiful. She was funny. Everybody liked her. Everybody wanted to be around her. And she was applying to the Naval Academy. And that's when I discovered like, oh, what is this academy thing? And do all beautiful women go there? Because this girl was like a rock star, right? Beautiful, intelligent, talented. I was like, that's where I want to go to find a life mate. If that's what they attract and that's who they recruit, maybe they'll make a mistake and invite me in too. So that's when I got turned on to the academies. I can't say that Air Force was the one that I looked for. I actually applied to the Air Force Academy, West Point, and the Naval Academy. I was just like, full ride scholarship plus military right away, plus beautiful women. How can you shake a stick at that? You can't. So it just happened to be that the Air Force Academy was the one that was the most interested in me as a candidate quickly. If you've ever applied to the military academies, Naval Academy is like notoriously bureaucratic. It takes a long time to get in. West Point is either responsive or not responsive, but the Air Force Academy, for whatever reason, it liked my profile. It liked me, or I just got lucky with the administration office, but it was a pretty smooth ride going through that application process.
Oh, cool. And so that brings you to, so you're a small rural Pennsylvania guy and you're moving out to Colorado for college.
Right.
What was that like? Had you traveled a lot? Did your family offer you opportunities to travel? Or was this like the first big move for you?
No, it was totally reckless, man. I had never really left Pennsylvania. I had no idea what Colorado looked like. All I knew is that it was very, very far from home. And that was exactly what I wanted. I knew that rural Pennsylvania didn't call to me and that my parents had set roots, deep, deep roots. They weren't going anywhere. So for me, it was, I could go to Maryland, but I've been to Maryland, and I could push hard for New York, but I've been to New York, right? Or I know of New York. I know of Maryland. I'm a Pennsylvania kid, right? But I never had crossed the other side of the country. I've never been to the Rocky Mountains. I've never seen snow as tall as I am, right? So it was a cool mystery. It was a really cool adventure. And of course, at the time, you could pull up AOL.com and look up pictures of Colorado, or you could go use Encyclopedia Britannica and see pictures of it there. But yeah, everything was beautiful. So it just seemed like, how could I say no to this adventure? It'd be new and it'd be unfamiliar, but it was guaranteed to be fun.
Yeah. And this is something that I try to tell people, and especially as myself being somebody from a small town, and I'm from Louisiana, a small town in Louisiana. So there's a lot of those rural towns, and I try to tell people, just get out. You can always come back, but get out. Don't go to, and no offense to these colleges like LSU and the University of Louisiana, but if you're from there, go to Colorado, go to Washington State, California, get some new experiences. And it seems to me like that sort of changed your trajectory in life.
Every adult that I've met who has traveled outside of their hometown, outside of the country, it changes everybody. It's guaranteed. It gives you, speaking about unfair advantages, right? The more experience you get dealing with different people, different backgrounds, different cultures, it literally gives you tools and perspective that nobody else in your peer group has. I go back home maybe once every 2 or 3 years back to Pennsylvania. I take my family to see grandma, and I do whatever else we do to be a good son, even though there's my son loves Pennsylvania because he associates it with the cold and the snow and it's rural. So there's always deciduous trees and giant forest everywhere. And he loves that because he's used to living in some pretty tropical areas. But every time I go back, I'm always shocked when I run into people that I graduated high school with. They're still living in the same town. Like I see the varsity star wrestler that everybody thought was going to be amazing now works at the mechanic, the auto mechanic shop down the street. Not a single thing wrong with that as a career choice, but how different the expectation was. he was the cool kid, and now he hasn't left that hometown. I was, the outcast, and I don't have, I visit the hometown once every 3 years for 4 or 5 days at a time, right? It's just a very different world. You get so much value. You get such an opportunity just by having something to talk about other than the same thing that you've been talking about throughout, throughout high school and everything else. It's imperative if you want to be successful to get as far away from everything just to get the experience. And like you said, Kervin, you can always go back. If you don't like the experience you're getting, if you're uncomfortable, if you're anxious, if you don't enjoy it, that's fine. Hop in your car, turn 180 degrees, go right back home. There's no shame in that. You still are wealthier because of the experience you had.
Yeah. And I mean, you're saying some very powerful stuff because first of all, failure is not the end. Sometimes failure is the only option in order to succeed. But then you also said, and I don't, looking at my demographics, we're not big in the high school market. Not too many high schoolers listening to what I talk about, but I really do. I would like to promote this to any high schoolers listening. If you're listening to what Andrew said, if you're struggling now in high school, that is not the end. You can go on and do great things. It doesn't matter what culture you're a part of. You can do great things. I think that has a lot to do with, it's a very American type of thing. You don't see that in a lot of other countries. I've been out to some other countries and people just stay in that same flow of always being where they are, where they've been their entire life.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, I want to stay on this a second just because I feel like there's two things that I want to hit on that you brought up. So I don't know what your age demographic, your listener base is, but let me tell you about what pattern that is worth talking about no matter what the demographic is. There's a pattern that happens where we start to make mistakes and we acknowledge our own mistakes in our hearts, right? We know when we've screwed up, even if we don't admit it to anybody, even if we don't show weakness, even if we slap on a fake smile and pretend like it was what we intended the entire time. And a lot of times we might make bad calls that got us in trouble, bad calls that gave us, responsibilities earlier than we were ready for responsibilities, whether that be marriage or children or, even like a criminal record, whatever it might be. Well, these mistakes end up becoming like anchors that hold us in one place, not just emotionally, but physically and geographically. So if you have, if you're 23 years old, 28 years old, 32 years old, and you can resonate with this idea of, well, I have been in just one place. I've only been in 2 places my whole life. What am I doing? Right? Like I'm from Colorado Springs and I moved to Denver. And that's pretty much as far as I've ever traveled in my 30 years of life or my 25 years of life. Right? If that resonates with you outside of the whole high school conversation, the experience of travel never grows old. It doesn't have a shelf life and it doesn't spoil at some point in time, right? Whether you're 55 or whether you're 15 and emancipated from your household, get the hell out. Like just get out. Unless you're in a professional job that's paying you a premium wage, there is no reason for you not to just jump ship. If you're interested or if you're looking to jump ship, make a radical life change because you'll find another $35,000 a year job somewhere else. Whatever skill sets you have in your repertoire right now, they are valuable in every city and every state all across the United States. And that's just staying in the United States. Because Kervin, when you talked about the way it works in foreign countries, you are so dead accurate that one of the things that has made America great and continues to make America a world leader is that our people have a diversity of opportunity to gain experience. If you're born in like a small town in Pakistan, you actually don't have the choice or the opportunity at all. If you're born to a poor family in Colombia, you're done. Like that's it. There's no radical change you can make. But here in the United States, we have the ability to make those radical changes because we have an interstate system that literally makes it so that as long as you can pay for gas and you have a driver's license, you can go anywhere in the continental United States. You don't have to cross a border or get permission or anything. It's just fascinating. I'm rambling now because I sound like a political route, though.
We'll get you up for president, but so I want to stay on it. I mean, this always happens in these things where I have these set bullets I want to hit, And then there's something that just resonates and we can just keep talking because I want to say, but somebody says, but Andrew, I don't have the money. Because you brought up a good point. You said if you're not financially stable, that's the point you should move on.
Yep.
So say, I'm scared, Andrew. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go into a new place with no money. What do you expect from me?
Yeah. So I love this question. The CIA teaches us about risk and stop me, Kervin, if you've heard this of too many times or if I've said it before, but human beings cognitively, the way that our biology is built, we don't handle risk well. We just don't. And the reason we don't handle it well is because we don't actually know how to logically and rationally balance risk versus reward. Inevitably, we become emotionally invested in the risk. Fear takes hold, anxiety takes hold, all these emotions get mixed in. And it's very hard to measure fear against something logical and rational, like a potential better job or a potential higher income or even a potential better life partner, because you might want to leave your hometown just to find a spouse or a partner, a date that has different life experience than you, right? It's very hard when your dating pool has been the same since you were in 10th grade. So you gotta travel to find a different mate. So whatever it is, it's always hard to measure the benefit of those logical, rational things against the fear, the risk of all those emotional things. So one of the first things that CIA teaches us is to understand the difference between real risk and perceived risk. All of the emotional stuff that we have, that's all perceived risk. It's not real. It's just perceived. Real risk is actual objective risk. So if I'm talking to somebody who says, hey, Andy, I don't have money. I have this debate with my wife pretty often too, because she came from a background in social work. And every time I kind of thump on my proverbial Bible about if you're planting seeds and it's not fertile soil, then get the hell out of that soil and go plant seeds somewhere else. And my wife is like, well, that's not an option for everybody. They don't have money. They don't have resources. They don't have a support network, right? All of the support network, the money, the family, the friends, the network, whatever it might be, those are perceived risks. Those are not real risks because the ability to make money is equal basically everywhere. You may not like the way you have to make money. Maybe you go out there and you are a barista in a Starbucks in the next town over, or maybe you go work a day labor job, or maybe you go do, some part-time work, whatever. You can generate income as easily anywhere as you can where you are right now. The fact that you know a guy who knows a guy who might get you a gig at the local insurance company, great. That's not a life-changing thing. One of the things I often talk about is life-changing money. Life-changing money is money that would change your life overnight, right? And for most people, life-changing money never happens. We get money and we get more money, but we never get life-changing money. So if you're not getting life-changing money opportunities where you are, then go somewhere else, because at least you're increasing the probability of having life-changing money. You're increasing the real rational benefits that you have by just sticking what you have in your pocket. Again, the great United States, basically any bank will let you use any ATM anywhere in the country. So just roll with it, man. If you've got $50 in your bank account, fill your gas tank, go one state over and literally put in an application at 2 or 3 different fast food joints. I don't care. You can make money happen. That's not a real risk. It is a perceived risk. You will build friends and you will build a network wherever you go. That is real, right? It's not comfortable, but it's real.
Now, and the way I see it is sometimes that family and that network is actually what's bringing you down.
It's what's holding you back, right? And holds you
there yet. Yeah. Holds you in that spot. And then you're stuck in what you were doing your whole life.
Have you ever been? And I'm sorry to interrupt you, man. The visual that comes to my mind here is anybody who's ever stood on the beach. If you've ever stood on the beach right where the tide rolls in, right? And my wife and I, one of our favorite things to do in Florida is go for walks on the beach. And one of her personal favorite things to do is to stand right where the ocean meets the sand, right where the waves roll in. And She likes it because when she stands there, she'll walk and she's walking on top of the sand. And it's really easy to walk across the sand. But as soon as you stop and a wave or two rolls over your feet, it starts to pull the sand on top of your feet. And you actually start to sink down into the sand. And then it's hard to lift your foot out. It's heavier. It's slower. You actually have to trudge the first 2 steps to pull that first foot out and pull that second foot out and start walking again. But once you start walking again, it's all smooth sailing, right? You might get wet. You might get sandy. You might step on a sharp shell here and there, but you're not stuck. And I find that what happens is so many of us stand in the same spot and the waves roll in and the sand weighs us down. And then before you know it, you're up to your mid calf, you're up to your knee, you're up to your hips. And it's almost impossible to move after that.
And that's such a powerful image. Because if you've ever been to the beach, you know that you get stuck there until you actually do the movement and move out. And it's painful, on the legs to get the feet out. But once you start walking and once you get out there, it becomes easier. So that's definitely like you said, anchoring you down. You have a network or a family that anchors you into a position. The insurance analogies, I have somebody who can get me into an insurance company, but it keeps you there. So you're still doing the same thing. And then you always tell yourself, oh, next week I'm going to get out of here.
Yeah.
Or next month I'm going to get out of here. Or once I get this much money in my bank account. And goals are great to set, but unless you outline that, I always tell my wife and kids get mad at me for this all the time because anytime they have a problem, they're like, hey, Dad, there's a problem. All right, what's the solution? And it's always like, well, I have a problem. I don't know the solution. If I knew the solution, I wasn't going to come to you. It's like, well, first think up some solutions and maybe we can talk about this. So when you're setting a goal, what I like to tell people is, have that goal and set it and then do sort of this like backwards outline of how are you going to accomplish that goal? What do you need at the end of it to accomplish it? And then work backwards.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. And it's really relevant in a lot of different ways. So if you take the word goal away and you call it a mission objective or a mission priority, you just walk through the entire mission planning process for any elite unit. You set the objective, the big objective first, right? Take down this terrorist network, intercept this, this communique between these 2 secret spies, whatever it might be. You set this big objective, and then you step back and you create secondary and tertiary objectives that will get you to that priority requirement, that priority accomplishment, right? And I think it's really relevant because goals are something that many people talk about and nobody really gives you any firm guidance on goals. So I would love to give some firm guidance on goals that I've seen work for me, that I see work for other people. And one of those is if you're making good goals if you have goals that are in short periods of time. Most people make goals in long periods of time. Oh, here's my 1-year goal, my 5-year goal, my 10-year goal. If that's what you're making, there's a good chance you're not hitting those goals because those are bullshit goals. Because here's the reality of it, right? The reality is life changes basically every 72 hours. There's studies out there that show that most people have some kind of significant life change within every 72 hours to every 7 days, right? In that window of time, something significant changes. Somebody gets a cold, somebody, gets bad news, somebody gets good news. There's some change in the market. There's some change in your job. There's some new project that happens, right? When there's so much dynamic change within a 7-day period of time, how are you going to hold on to a goal that's 52 7-day periods away? It's a ludicrous idea. And then when you miss your 1-year goal, who do you blame? Yourself. So then eventually after missing 1 or 2 of these 1-year goals, you start thinking you're just bad at goals. You're just bad at making your goals. You have no self-discipline. You have no follow through. You start tearing yourself down. And then you stop setting goals at all, right? It's asinine that no one out there has helped people understand that goals should really be set from like 15 to 30 days away. And after you have a series of 15 to 30 day goals, then, start to extrapolate those out. Where are you going to be in 2 months? Where are you going to be at the end of the quarter? Where are you going to be in 2 quarters? The only people I've ever found that do this well are businesses, because businesses have revenue targets every 30 days. They have quarterly goals. They have semi-annual goals, right? They have all these touch points because businesses have learned that if you're not on track every 7 days, they have weekly sales targets, for crying out loud. Like, if you want to model yourself off of success, then model yourself off of successful businesses. If they're making, tangible goals every 3 to 7 days, if they have tangible performance objectives day to day, why don't we? Why do we think that for some reason it's enough to say in 5 years, I'm going to graduate from such and such university? You might graduate from university, it might be a different university. Or you might start university and then your parents get sick and you take a year off. Who knows? Like, it's impossible to have any idea what's going to happen. So set much, much shorter goals and then get yourself into a pattern of achieving those goals. And then you're going to have the confidence and the experience you need to set longer goals and have the continuity and the consistency to stick through and finish those goals. But for anyone out there struggling with goals, man, I think most of the goal setting mindset, self-help stuff out there is absolute baloney, because they're not giving you actual, tangible best practices like we get in the elite world and like you see in elite businesses.
And so it's a perfect segue to Everyday Spy, which the company was the book first, Everyday Spy.
Yeah. So my company kind of started by accident, right? Because you're right. I created a book called Everyday Espionage, and I created the book to basically give people simple tactical tools to use in the workplace so that they could basically shortcut their career using spy tactics. And it's written like a spy case study. It's written specifically for actionable performance and actionable tactics. It's not theory or conceptual, right? And I wrote the book. I had no audience for it. I didn't know what I was doing. I just did what I thought would be right. And then the book started selling. And then we started getting invited to come speak about espionage and speak about spy tactics. I was still working in corporate America at the time. So I was literally living the same principles I put into the book. And I could use my own career as the proof of concept for every tactic that I had published. And that ended up spawning a business, right? And going back to our goal conversation, I was just living 3 to 5 days at a time, just taking opportunities as they came, setting goals about, I'm going to try to speak to 3 different groups this week or this month. I'm going to try to generate this many sales. I'm going to, make this many cold calls and see if people are interested in having me speak at their event. And that's just how the whole thing started.
And so go let the audience know now, you're not going to get any tradecraft in this episode or anything like that, because I want everybody to go to Everyday Spy. And if you love what Andrew's saying, if you're like me and everything Andrew says, it's a very thoughtful, he knows a lot about a lot of things. Go to Everyday Spy, sign up for the course, or sign up for the newsletter. Take the quiz. I took the quiz for the Super Spy. Got Mastermind, I think is what I got.
Yeah, nice.
But it's got a lot of great stuff. You can take it from me. Go to there. But so you started up Everyday Spy, and what was that like? Where we were talking about that fear of failure, fear of I don't know how this is going to succeed. What was that? What was going through your mind when you started that up?
Yeah. So, I would love to shift the paradigm on the idea of fear of failure, because it's something again, it's one of those taglines that's thrown around a lot, this idea of fear of failure. I worry that it's said so often that people assume that it's true, because what I have found is that there are real fears out there, right? Fear of death is real. Fear of capture is real. Right? Fear of being discovered is real. Like, that's real fear. When you've felt those fears, all of a sudden failure does not compare as a fear, right? Failure, if anything, is a guarantee. Failure is an opportunity, because every failure you have means that you just learned something new. How boring must it be to do everything right the first time, to successfully do everything you say you're going to do, and then just seek out the next challenge, only to find that the next challenge wasn't very challenging either, right? That leads to a very boring life. So what I would actually argue is that instead of being afraid of failure, we really need to be seeking out failure. Find failure. Don't fear failure. Find failure. Because the more you're pushing yourself to find it and fail, you're learning rapidly, you're gaining experience, and when it comes to comparing yourself to others, you're doing what other people are not doing. Most people out there are avoiding fear, right? They're avoiding failure. They're managing fear. They're trying to set themselves up for success. They're trying to do the same thing. They're trying to do what they're good at. And then they think somehow they're going to get better by just doing the thing they're good at over and over again, right? If you make a good chocolate cake, guess what happens if you keep making the same chocolate cake? It gets incrementally better, but you have no idea how to make a vanilla cake or a pineapple upside down cake or a red velvet cake. So you're not going to be very successful as a baker, and nobody really starts to care about your chocolate cake that's 1% better than the last chocolate cake you made. Be the one that goes out there and finds failure. So when I started our business, I was expecting failure. Like I'm looking every day for failure, right? I'm expecting to pick up the phone and have people say no. I'm expecting to make a price and have people say that's too expensive. I'm still expecting that every day. I actually just wrote a proposal the other day. I have a client who's in California, and he runs, it's a second cybersecurity firm that he's built. The first one he sold. So he's in what's known as an ultra high net worth client, a very wealthy guy. And I wrote this proposal, this 2-day training that he was asking for. And I'm sitting here talking to my wife, and I'm like, how much should we charge for this proposal? Because you've got a price is like this magical thing that doesn't make any sense. When you're setting the price, like if you think that the coffee you're buying is actually like somebody sat back and calculated the true value of the coffee to be $4.50 or whatever, you're fooling yourself. It's all friggin', it's witches and like reading phones and tea leaves. That's all that goes into making a price. So I make this 2-day proposal. It's just on a sheet of paper. And I just go ahead and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to ask $45,000 for it. And then right before I hit send, I say, what if I just say $57,000, right? Instead of $45,000. What if I just add $12,000 to the proposal, right? What's going to happen here? Well, maybe he'll say no. And if he says no, then what he's really going to say is, that's outside of budget. Do you have another option, right? Real risk versus perceived risk. The perceived risk is that this client is just going to explode and say no. The real risk is that if he doesn't like the proposal, he might just come back and say, this is outside of budget. Do you have an alternate idea? Right? So I hit send, and then like 15 minutes later, I get a text message that says, yes, send me the invoice. We're ready to roll. What that told me is that I still failed. $57,000 wasn't the right amount to charge. I should have charged $5,000. I should have charged it to the place where I fail. So I actually discover where the failure point is. Without that knowledge, now I'm just stuck making less money than I could have made. Right? And that's the learning point.
Yeah. And whenever you bring in money into it, and it's a very, especially in this day and age, I think it's a very important conversation to have, not on sort of a proposal level like you and I would do, sending out a proposal to a company and saying, this is the price and what do you guys think? But let's say somebody's sitting in an interview and they just had this great interview. They are offered the position and the recruiter says, so what is your price point? You know, what salary do you desire? And that's a very scary thing for some people, because the way that we view money, especially in the United States, the way that we view money as a powerful thing. And so there are two thoughts that go in the head, because I know this because I've done it many a time, sat there and contemplated, what am I worth? That's what you're basically saying. What am I worth?
Exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
So you can lowball yourself and say, well, I know most people in this position are making $85,000 a year. I can say that. I know I'm worth, $130,000. Is that going to be out of their budget? And what is the fault? What's going to happen if you put your foot down and say, I'm worth $130,000. If you guys don't want to give it to me, then I'm not going to take this job. There's still that fear in there that they're going to be told what's the fear? Because I don't even know what's going through my mind at that point.
So yeah, let's demystify some of this, because this is a great example, right? If you want to know what your worth is to a company, here's a mind-boggling thing. Whatever you're being paid, right? Whatever number it is that you're being paid. And this is how companies, how Fortune 500 companies, the best companies in the country, how they structure their pay scales. Whatever you're being paid, the company is expecting that you are going to produce 300% more than what you're paid. So if you're paid $100,000 a year the company has calculated in, right? The accountant side, the business consulting side, everybody, the actuarials, they've calculated that if you're being paid $100,000, you're going to generate $300,000 worth in business for the company. So let's talk about what you're worth. If you're being paid $100,000, what are you worth? $300,000. Think about that. So if you're being paid $50,000 today, you are actually worth $150,000. That is so counterintuitive to the way most people think, because most people think I'm actually worth less than what I ask for, and then I should be making a profit, right? I should be working to make more money than what I am worth. So if I made $50,000 at the last job, I should try to make $60,000 at this job. Even though I haven't gotten better, I will get better on the job and eventually be worth $60,000. No, you are already worth $150,000. If a company is offering you a position, they have already answered in their head, you are worth a minimum of 300% more than what they're paying you. If you're in a sales job, brother, salesmen are estimated at 700% more than their salary. That is nuts. So if you're a salesman making $100,000 a year, the company already anticipates that you're going to make them $700,000 a year. You are worth a whole hell of a lot more than you think that you're worth. And the way that you handle that in negotiation is that you start knowing in advance that that is your number, right? So if you want to give people a discount to make them say yes, if you're afraid of having someone laugh in your face when you tell them what your salary expectations are, then don't give them the 300% number. Be reasonable and just say that you're worth 150% more than what they're trying to pay you, right? So, hey, the job is a $80,000 a year job. Would you like that? And you're like, yeah, but I was thinking I would take it at more like $160,000 because I already know I'm going to generate $300,000 a year in revenue for you. Now, once you say that, no one's laughing in your face, right? Now they're asking themselves the question of, do I pay this person more money because they clearly know what they're talking about? Or do I pick an alternate candidate who isn't as well informed as this person, but I can get them for a song for $80,000? You always have to think about the real cost of competition. That's why there's always 3 candidates that make it to the final stage of an interview, because the company wants to be able to choose based on who is going to have the biggest impact to the company. But if you roll in there already knowing your value and knowing your worth, then the company is like, ooh, if this person already knows their value today, just project how much more valuable they're going to be in a year. Project how much more valuable they're going to be in 5 years, or if they make a career out of this company, right? And that's a benefit to the hiring officer, because the hiring person knows that once somebody's in the door, they only get promoted at 7 to 10% every year. I know it's a math game. I'm getting complicated now, but it's so much cheaper to hire somebody at a high pay rate and then incrementally increase their pay during promotional seasons each year. It's so much cheaper to do that than to constantly have a revolving door and hiring people in at low wages. And your HR professionals know that. They're just waiting for you to prove that you know it too.
That's great advice. And you brought up something, and like I said, you're very thoughtful with your answers, because you think of these things that I never even thought about, because there's never been a person I talked to in a salary discussion that has said that, oh, I make way more than I'm worth. It's almost always, yeah, I'm only making this much, but I'm going to go, and it's always, I'm going to go somewhere else so that I can make what I'm worth. I've never heard a person say, yeah, I'm leaving this so that I can go make more than which I think is a good mental, it's good mental aspect to have when you're dealing with these salary negotiations of, I'm worth more than that.
Yep.
I know that. I'm not going to take that much less.
And when and going back to our failure conversation, right? You want someone to say no. You want the HR person to laugh in your face. That is exactly what you want them to do. Because what comes after the laughter is what tells you if you're in the right job, like if you're in the right interview or in the wrong interview. Because if they laugh at you and they're like, buddy, that's so far outside of budget, we can't even make that possible. Do you have is there another number that we can reach together? If they're having that kind of conversation, now they still want you. They haven't laughed you out, kicked you out the door. This is a company that sees your true value and they want to keep you. Whereas if someone laughs at you and they're like, this interview's over, get the hell out. Wrong. If that's how they're going to respond to you pushing back on one thing, just imagine what a career in that company is going to look like.
Sounds like a toxic workplace.
Right out of the gates. If they're going to literally just blow you off, then they would have blown off your good ideas. They would have blown off all of your your incentive, your initiatives that you create alone. They would blow you off your entire career. And then you'd be, 20 years into a company and begrudged and angry about it. Instead, make people say no, because the thing they say after no is so insightful into who you're talking to.
Yeah, definitely. It's a better answer than you'll receive when you're asking that person about their work culture. And I think we have reached the time that we're going to get into the deep stuff, because I did want to get you on here to have you talk China.
Yeah.
I know I listened to you talk about China, I think, on multiple podcasts. And I've heard, so you're our third former CIA guest. I had Mike Baker on. I heard him on Rogan recently talking about, I do. There was the China 2040 plan, the 2030 plan, and then he was talking about the 2025 plan that China's looking at. But you brought up the 2024 plan because of what's going on in Russia, Ukraine, North Korea, all these sort of geopolitical conflicts that are going on, or what we would say saber rattling. And you said 2024. So I'd like to ask you about, I know when you're putting out years, especially in intelligence analysis, it's all about, well, this is the most likely scenario, ever 100%.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
If you wanted to, I'd like to get you to talk a little bit about what China is doing, what their focus is, and what would that 2024 year look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to clarify, it is a 2025 plan, just like Mike was saying. That is how they schedule out their plans. But in order to hit a goal in 2025, you have to take certain action in 2024.
There you go.
Right? So China has already made the commitment. Xi Jinping had made the commitment at the annual convention, I think it was 3 years ago, where he said that by 2025, China would be the world's top exporter of high technology chips. High technology semiconductors, high technology rare earth mineral based processing chips. He committed China will be the world's number one producer. Well, right now, the world's number one producer is Taiwan, right? And behind Taiwan is China. So the only way China becomes the world's largest is if they control the Taiwanese markets. That's the only way. So when Xi Jinping said that, he said that it would happen by 2025. He created a picture where the only option he has is to either administratively take over Taiwan, which administratively is how they took over Hong Kong. Most people don't realize that. The Chinese government actually changed the legislation and changed the law process in Hong Kong before they forced themselves in and actually had all the police riots and all the beatings and all the stuff that happened in 2019. They had already changed the foundation of the legislation before they went in physically. So they've been laying the same groundwork in Taiwan. However, with the acceleration of the war in Ukraine and between Ukraine and Russia, this increased conflict in Europe has created a new world, right? COVID created a new world. It made the whole world aware of the problems with our supply chain. It made the whole world aware of China as this massive centerpiece, this choke point for everything from manufacturing to shipping channels to core components of intelligent devices and dumb devices, right? Whether you're talking plastic or whether you're talking magnets, China's the hub to transport them and facilitate the manufacturing of them around the world. So the world changed significantly. So the only way Xi Jinping keeps that 2025 plan is by getting very aggressive against Taiwan. And the more that you see the tit for tat and the escalation between the United States and China right now with regards to Taiwan, the more it just kind of demonstrates China's current commitment to that 2025 goal. If they would have let it go, they wouldn't further the issue They wouldn't further escalate and make threats, right? They would just leave it be.
Right.
But that's not what they're doing.
So what do you say to the person that is sitting, let's say, in the United States, and we've been at war for, 2 decades. We're just getting done with that. And they go, so what, Andrew? What do we care about China? Why is it important that we push back against the Chinese?
Yeah. So this is an interesting question too, because the world actually hasn't seen war for the last 20 years. We really haven't. We call the war in Afghanistan the war in Iraq wars, right? But there's an actual economic definition for war, for both interstate war and intrastate war, two different types of war. Big major conflicts actually happen economically on about a 40-year cycle. And every 40 years, there's a new major conflict. And it's been found that every 40 years, the new conflict is either popular or unpopular in cycle, right? So like World War I, unpopular. World War II, popular, right? And then Vietnam, not popular, right? It goes through these cycles. We are due, the cycle, if anybody's interested, it's called the Kondratiev cycle. It's a Russian economist from Soviet era Russia, Kondratiev cycle, the Kondratiev wave. And that prediction, that cycle has predicted that 2024 to 2027 is kind of the next window for not just a major global conflict, but a popular major global conflict. So the reason I say all that isn't because I need the average American to be like, oh, well, in that case, I'm all for it. It's because all of your analysts and all of your predictive analysts at CIA, at DOD, at NSA, they've already come to the conclusion. All of your political narratives, all of your pundits that are out there, they already know we're due for a popular war cycle. And they already know it. So the fact that it's playing out this way with China is just kind of proof that the economic cycle reigns true. And you can already anticipate what is going to happen when that conflict starts to reach more of a head. So what will that look like? It's going to look like continued military exercises, continued military posturing in the South China Seas. It's also going to look like the creation of new alliances. If you're not already aware of the alliance between China and Russia and the alliance between China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, this alliance has become like very clearly solidified in the last 4 or 5 months, particularly during the Ukraine-Russia conflict. North Korea is launching test missiles over Japan and South Korea at a rate that's like 10 times what they've ever done in the past. And the reason they're emboldened to do that is because they know they have top cover from Russia and China. And if you don't believe that, look at the UN Security Council holdings, because Russia and China have actually pushed back against the UN for trying to condemn nuclear tests in North Korea. Like, the whole thing is playing out very clearly in the global stage. The problem is that we are the United States and we become hyper-focused on one narrative, on one task one issue at a time. And for a while, we were hyper-focused on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And then we became hyper-focused on inflation. And we're about to become hyper-focused on midterm elections. But the whole world just keeps on spinning. And unfortunately, our enemies, particularly China, knows that America becomes hyper-focused on one thing. And that gives them all the space that they need to keep the wheels grinding in their own best interest. So that's probably more than you asked for, but that is exactly why I feel like we need to be paying attention to China. They're making very strategic moves. They have made commitments that kind of show their hand. And when you look at the larger economic and larger globalization issues that we're facing, it all points in the same direction, towards some kind of direct conflict. Not necessarily a direct military conflict, but a direct conflict economically, militarily, socially with China, the other largest global power competitor in the world.
So do you see a scenario where China invades, well, we would call invades because China views Taiwan as, the one China policy. Do you see a scenario where they do invade Taiwan and the U.S. just says, well, it's not our fight yet. We'll see how this plays out, like we're doing in Ukraine right now?
Yeah, unfortunately, what I think is most likely. So I believe that in 2024, China is going to make a very dramatic move against Taiwan. It will launch something that our media will call an invasion of some sort, whether that means that they drop missiles or whether that means that they have like some sort of hostile takeover from within, or whether that means they drive personnel carriers across the Taiwan Straits, right? It's an 80-mile stretch. It's not a long way. And if Taiwan tries to protect itself, if a personnel carrier boat comes across the Taiwan Strait and the Taiwanese shoot at it, you've got hundreds of miles of armed coastline in southern China that are just going to light up Taiwan. And all of that's going to happen 7,000 miles away from the United States, right? So unless there is actually a carrier group in the Taiwan Strait, China will get across the strait faster than a military vessel from the United States can get into the Taiwan Strait. So we call it in the global intelligence world, or in the intelligence world that I come from, we call that a tyranny of distance. Distance gives you a unique tactical advantage on the battlefield. China has that with Taiwan. It would be ludicrous for them not to use that advantage not use that distance to their advantage when sucking up the Taiwanese economic benefits, or the Taiwanese economic advantage. So they go in, they invade, however they want to call it invading, or however we will call it. It will be some kind of invasion. And then my biggest fear is that some element of the U.S. Navy is going to get involved and is going to take hostile fire. And there will actually be Chinese weapons shooting at American naval vessels. And Americans will die in this initial incursion, because that's going to be a total mess if that happens. Everybody knows that's going to be a mess, because once an American dies in direct conflict with China, then there's a response that has to come, and then there's a counter response that has to come. That is the reason why I believe China will do it so quickly and so surgically that the United States is basically like, we're 4 hours away from being able to do anything. So the best that we can do is just rally international support for Taiwan, right? What was the only thing the United States could do in the Ukraine and the Russia invasion of Ukraine? They couldn't react fast enough. Tyranny of distance was against them. So the only thing they could do was basically rally and drum up international support. And it may work, but it's not going to stop the Chinese. Right? It's too important to them to have Taiwan.
And if you want even the most anti-patriotic American to get behind the U.S. military, kill an American military service member if you're in another country, and you'll drum up support very quickly in the U.S.
Exactly, and I would be remiss not to highlight that is exactly how politicians think also, right? Politics is a game of tools, and the U.S. military and every active duty military member knows they are a tool of statecraft. And if that tool is designed to create public support, you're going to be put in a dangerous situation, and you may very well die. And that is a terrible thing to think about, but it's history has proven it to be true time and time again, that there's always a first casualty in a conflict. And a big part of that first casualty, a big reason that first casualty happens, is because public support is needed. And that support comes when a casualty is reported.
Wow. And I always like to just say, we are talking about human lives. And I don't care, where it's at, what country they're at, it's devastating. And you never like to see it.
No.
We still, as humans, have this mentality of the other person has to become the enemy. And I view it as, in order for me to stand in front of another person and shoot them directly, they have to be vilified. And
in order for you to recover from that, right?
Right. Yeah. And so that is something that I can see right now, having been, so I was in Poland a few years ago as an overt anti-Russian aggression force for the US. And it was so the Polish loved us, but when you read the Russian media in the area, it was these Americans are slobs. These Americans are here to have sex with your wives and make their own American babies they can take with them. So it's already, the rhetoric is already being ramped up, at least in Russia and China. And I know in the US it's being ramped up for Russians. There's a lot of vitriol towards Russia, especially Vladimir Putin. So obviously, I think I already know the answer. Do you see that continuing, the rhetoric ratcheting up?
Yeah, what you're seeing when you see that rhetoric, you're seeing partly a cultural response, right? That's cultural whiplash, if you will, because it's what's selling right now. It's what makes people click. It's what makes people read. So there's an economic benefit to it. So that's why journalists who are not government affiliated, that's why they write about it. That's why they use emotional words, right? But the other part of what you're seeing is the information war, because the information battlefield happens before the combat battlefield. So you have to kind of lay siege of the information battlefield first. And a big part of that is being able to control public opinion, control or direct a narrative. And it's very, very uncomfortable when you start to realize how often, how common it is to have politicians and analysts and Congress people sit around a table over lunch and talk about the narrative they're trying to paint for the American people. It happens all the time. It's not nefarious because they're not trying to lie to us. What they're trying to do is frame future support through current language. So it's all very deliberate and it's all very intentional. The exact same thing is happening in China against the United States. The exact same thing is happening in Russia against the United States. The same thing is happening in Germany right now with regards to the United States as well. So if this is really interesting to me, Germany, the German chancellor just made a commitment to make Germany the largest military force in all of NATO. Now, just in case anybody forgot, Germany started World War I and Germany started World War II. And Germany was basically like the Western powers all agreed that Germany should not even have a military. And now we're at a place where the German chancellor has said, 70 years later, we're going to have the largest military in all of NATO, specifically because he sees the United States leveraging NATO and leveraging Europe to the United States' benefit, not to NATO's benefit. So it's an extremely smart move, but it's crazy to think that we've never gone to war with China. We've gone to war with Germany twice, and yet we're supporting their development of the largest army in Europe, and we're villainizing the Chinese.
And here we are, some would say on the cusp of World War III, and we are talking about Germany ramping up their army. We're talking about, what you'll read in the headlines as a far-right fascist in Italy coming into power. And there's all of these World War II and World War I narratives being pushed. Russia's moving their area to defend themselves from Germany and from NATO. And so everything is cyclical, just like you brought up, which I'm not a CIA guy, so I didn't know about the Kondrada wave.
Yeah,
I had no idea about this. But this is how predictive analysis works. You look back through history and you can sort of predict what's going to happen.
It's also how you shape a narrative, right? Because
right.
Everybody has accessible in their memory images of World War II. Everybody has accessible in their memory what they learned in high school and what they've seen in movies. So it's really easy to quickly shape an opinion if you can call back to something that they're familiar with, right? It's the same reason you and I were making a comparison about what it's like to stand on the beach. Because if someone can remember it, if they can visualize it themselves, they can pick it up faster. In reality, World War III is going to look nothing like World War II. In many ways, I would argue we're already in the middle of World War III, right? It's a massive proxy conflict with largely economic and social weapons instead of guns and tanks and carpet bombing. Even if you look at what's happening in Ukraine and Russia right now, there hasn't been like a bombing raid where bombers have flown overhead and dropped bombs, on a city. That was very common in World War II. So everything has changed significantly. But yeah, I cut you off and I apologize, but it's just the whole idea of being able to visually reference something from history to shape a narrative right now for the future it's a very common move in the information warfare space.
And I was listening to I can't remember the guy's name, but he's a psychologist and works in, the mental aspect of a lot of things. And he said, talking to somebody that was born in like 78, 79 and said, you were a child in the 80s and 90s, but your mind doesn't know the difference. It can still have this nostalgia for the 50s or the 40s. So you bringing up that we have already lived in our minds in World War II with just the movies, the sheer amount of movies that we've watched throughout our lives. Our brain feels like we've been in that. So I'm looking at it like this is going on to World War III. And you might think, well, why isn't anybody freaking out about it? And I kind of think it's along that aspect of, well, we already feel like in our mind we've been through it without that sort of chaos that happened and the real threat of your life being taken, like the Brits felt whenever Germany was carpet bombing them.
Yeah,
so we're kind of.
I'm sorry. There's
go ahead.
There's an element there where because we have a visual reference, because we think we have a reference, we're waiting to see additional indicators, right? So I know another conversation that I often find myself having with people is, there's behind closed doors, there are people who will say, if you were Jewish in Nazi Germany, why did you stay there? How did you not get out? How did you not leave? Right? And they'll say there was writing on the wall, and they'll say, it was so clear. It wasn't clear at the time. There wasn't writing on the wall at the time. Nothing like that had ever happened before, ever. No one had ever seen anything like that. So there was no reference point for people to take specific action, right? So in essence, they were just as surprised by something they had never seen before. So it's only through the benefit of hindsight and learning from history that we end up having this idea of, so now we're waiting to see indicators that we've seen before. We're waiting to see constitutions change. We're waiting to see, fascist governments rise. We're waiting to see these indicators so that we can then confidently say, oh, things are changing and World War III has started. In reality, World War II looked completely different than World War I. World War III will look completely different than World War II, right? The Cuban Missile Crisis and all the fears of nuclear attack, that was a period of time that will not repeat the same way a second time. So, but, unfortunately, people don't realize that evolution in social conflict doesn't look like it's looked in the past, even though we all reference it by referencing things from the past.
Yeah, definitely. And it's kind of like, and I think I read that this actually wasn't really true, but it's kind of like that frog in the pot of water that's getting, you put it in cold water and start to boil, and that the frog's not going to jump out in time. Once it starts to boil, now you're dead.
Right.
So the analogy is still there in how we are living. And I know you're a busy man and you've got a lot of things to do. You're traveling all around. So I won't take up much more of your time, but I would like to give you a few minutes to just let everybody know what you're doing, where they can find you. If you're doing any speaking engagements that you want to promote, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it very much. So all I want, if anybody's still listening and they are enjoying what we're talking about today, all you have to do is you can find me at my homepage, everydayspy.com. Just go there, check it out, take the Spy Superpower quiz that you were talking about, Kervin. Check out the different courses that we have available on tap. Sign up for the newsletter, whatever you want. I'm here to teach. That's all I'm trying to do is just, my life changed when CIA trained me on the American taxpayer dollar. And then when I left CIA and realized that so much of the training I received is not available to the public, not even because it's like classified, but just because no one's ever taken the step to put it into a format that the public can consume. So the whole mission I have with my company is just to be a pass-through of what the American people have already paid for, right? So if I can teach, and if you want to learn, it's all there at everydayspy.com. If you're an audio person, if you like learning through listening, I have a top 1% iTunes top 10 podcast called Everyday Espionage Podcast. Go ahead, find it on any of your favorite platforms. If you're a social media person, you'll find me everywhere at Everyday Spy. Whether it's Facebook or whether it's Instagram or whether it's TikTok, at Everyday Spy is where you'll find me on all social media platforms. And I'm here to teach, and if you're here to learn, then we're going to make a really good team.
And all of that's going in the show notes because I highly recommend. The website is awesome. The sort of stuff that you're providing is incredible. It goes way above, the training that I received as just an intelligence analyst in the Army and throughout my career. So a lot of fascinating stuff. Andrew, thank you so very much. I can't say it enough just to be able to talk to you And sometimes I do these things for my own edification because I just love, what someone is saying at a particular time. And I just want to hear them kind of say it to me, I guess, and focus on what that is. So thank you so much for taking the time.
And my pleasure, Kervin. Thank you for having me, brother. And thank you for being considerate for a busy schedule that I wish wasn't so busy.
Yeah. Well, as I always say, stay safe out there.